Hello, my name's Mark Arnold and I look after additional needs at Urban Saints. This is the first module in the Additional Needs Practitioner self-paced learning program, supporting children and young people with additional needs. I don't know about you, but I always think that it's really important that if we're talking about a particular demographic group, in this case, children and young people with additional needs, that we hear from them. And so during this self-paced learning module, there are going to be a couple of video clips that I'll get you to go and look at and then come back to this session to continue. The first of those is going to be right now. And if you head to the link that's on your screen right now and pick video 1, you'll hear from Lynette and her son Kieran as they share a little bit of their journey. There are a couple of really useful things for you to pick up from this video clip. Firstly, about language. Language is really important for us in this area, isn't it? And in this video clip, Lynette and her son Kieran describe Kieran as having Asperger's syndrome. Now that's a term we're moving away from a little bit these days, but individually, Kieran's absolutely at liberty to describe himself how he wishes. More generally, we would talk about autistic children and young people. At the end of this video clip that I'm going to get you to watch now, you'll also hear Kieran give us a really important challenge, one which I hope will stay with you as it has with me beyond this session. I'll see you back in just a moment. I hope you enjoyed that video with Lynette and Kieran as an introduction to our session that we're going through right now. We're going to split our time up into 3 parts. First of all, I'll share with us a little bit about the state of the nation. What does it mean when we're talking about supporting children and young people with additional needs, whether that's in a church context, a schools context, uniformed organisations? In 2026, what does that mean for us now? Then there'll be a section that explores tools, tips, strategies, ideas that we can put in place that can make a real difference for the children and young people that we're supporting. And finally, there'll be some opportunity for you to respond to what you've learned. There's some case studies for you to explore and have a look at. And I'll also signpost you towards more resources that you can look at after this session. As you prepare to go through this self-paced module, I would encourage you to find something you can use as a fiddle or fidget to help you with focus and concentration. We're all sensory creatures. We all have a need to find something that we can fiddle with or doodle on or manipulate as we are learning together. I know folk at my home church who knit and crochet. That's their form of fidgeting. So hopefully by now you found something you can use that will help you to focus, concentrate and stay connected with what we're looking at through this session. That big picture then about what it means when we're thinking of children and young people with additional needs in our churches, in our schools, in our clubs, and what's the context for all of that? Well, in the UK, 1 in 5 children and young people have an additional need of some kind. Additional needs is a broad topic. It covers all areas of disability, health conditions, mental health conditions, anything that needs support for a child or young person to be able to learn and develop alongside their peers. In different parts of the UK, this is referred to as additional support needs or additional learning needs, and those are helpful descriptors for us as well. I think, and I hope that you will as well, that this gives us, in a church context, 2 distinct yet connected areas to hold in our hearts and minds. Firstly, from a ministry point of view, how do we support the children and young people that we're already journeying with, those that we already see on a regular basis? But we also know that the vast majority of children and young people with additional needs don't connect with church. Some work done by Baptist Press, and this was before COVID, so it's a little while ago now. Then they shared that 90% of children and young people with additional needs don't come to church. Anecdotally, we think that's at least 95% now. So there's a real imperative for us to think missionally, to think beyond the four walls of our church, and to work out ways that we can connect with that 95% in the community all around us. We know they're struggling. Urban Saints is part of the Disabled Children's Partnership. And through that partnership, we've been reaching out to families for quite a few years to find out how they're doing. And the reality is that they're struggling. They're doing worse now than they have done for a long time. COVID had a big impact, the cost of living crisis, the reduction in local authority support and care have all contributed towards families needing us now more than ever. So we need to think about this from a missional point of view too. Siblings and parents often feel excluded from a wide range of different social activities, and that includes church. Mumsnet shared that with us, and I was thrilled that they picked up on siblings, an often overlooked group. Siblings can often be junior carers at home. They can miss out on stuff because plans can change at the last minute because of their brother or sister. They're often bullied because they have a brother or sister with additional needs. So think about the siblings of the children and young people that you journey with that have additional needs. And as we work through this session together, think about how to support them as well. Of course, one way that we can reach all of that family group, and particularly the children and young people that we are looking to reach out to, is through school. Many schools are happy to invite local churches to come and be a community contact for them, to perhaps come in and help with things like assemblies, after school clubs, maybe even RE lessons. Often it's specialist schools that are left till last to have that church and community contact. So even if you're already doing some schools work, think about reaching out to specialist schools in your area. They would really value that input. And I know from my experience of being a dad to a son with a long list of additional needs, that his school, which is the one that's on your screen right now, really welcomed local church connection, and both the school and the church benefited from it. At least 53% of families tell us that having a disabled young person causes some or major relationship difficulties or breakups. This was some work that About Families did, again, several years ago now. Anecdotally, we think this figure has increased too, maybe into the 70%. Often we follow in the UK North American trends, and there was a study done in the United States a couple of years ago which specifically looked at married couples who have an autistic child. And this study identified that around 80% of those couples had split up. Catastrophic figures which illustrate the pressures that families can come under, particularly in an environment where there is little or no secular support that's available for them. There's much that we can do as church, though. I know a family that have twin teenagers, and the teenagers both have a list of additional needs and health conditions. They need 24/7 round-the-clock care. And at the beginning of the long summer holiday a couple of years ago, they realised there was no secular respite support that was going to be available for them. So they reached out to their church to find out if there was anything their church could do to support them. And their church stepped up brilliantly. They did what all good churches do in a crisis, in addition to praying, and that's to bake, to make food and bring that round for the family. But they also did other practical things. A couple of times a week, a small team would come and childmind for the twins, whilst mum and dad got a bit of a break and some time to themselves. 3 or 4 times during the school holiday, this team would take the twins out to a theme park or somewhere else that they enjoyed to go for a day, to give mum and dad a whole day to themselves, to plan a real trip out, or maybe just to sleep if that's what they wanted. And what the church found when engaging with the family at their home was that with all the pressures of looking after the twins and doing their jobs, that a few things around the house and garden had slipped. The garden was a bit of a jungle. The house needed a bit of decorating. And so they formed a bit of a DIY SOS team. And one of the days when the twins were taken to the theme park and mum and dad were packed off for the day, they came and blitzed the garden, did some decorating, took care of a few other jobs that needed to be sorted out, and really poured blessing over this family. There's much we can do to help and support families of children and young people with additional needs. And that goes beyond what we do on a Sunday morning or a club night. We might have started our module today thinking about individual children, young people in our church, in our groups that we are supporting each week. Now we're starting to think about those that are in the community, their siblings, their parents, and how to support them not just once or twice a week, but at key moments during the week, the month, the year, when they really need us most. Poorer communities twice as likely to include children and young people with additional needs. A big study was done on this by LKM Co and the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, and they explored links between disability and poverty, of which there are many. Those are environmental, housing, diet, but also there are things around how more affluent communities are able to afford private diagnosis, therapies, support for their child, which poorer communities aren't able to fund privately. Lots of links between additional needs and poverty. So if you're reaching out to a more deprived community, you're much more likely to see children and young people with additional needs coming into your setting. And then the final bit of statistics before I land a couple of these thoughts through some stories. At least 60% of children and young people with additional needs are bullied. Now, we know that that's an underreported figure. The reality is that it's much higher than this because not everybody's willing to admit to being a victim of bullying. But bullying can happen in lots of different places. It can happen in schools, in the streets, online, of course. But bullying can also happen in our churches. Think of times when you've known a child or young person with additional needs struggling in your context. And maybe there have been folk in your church that have looked harshly and tutted and made comments. And of course, that's bullying. And it's really making a difficult situation unhelpful for that child or young person and the family that they're with. I sometimes refer to people like that as meerkats because it can be like heads shooting up and swiveling round like meerkats do. And I long for the day that every church has a sign on its door with a picture of a meerkat and a red line through it, a meerkat-free zone, a place where everyone is safe and free from bullying. Let me tell you Martin's story, just to bring a few of the things I've been talking about together. For Martin's story, come with me in your imagination, if you will, to my home church in Bournemouth on the south coast of England. It's club night. And as we're there greeting the young people, 9 to 13-year-olds on this occasion, who are coming to club and saying hello to a few of the grown-ups that are dropping them off, a car draws up and a mum and her lad get out that I've never seen before. But as they head up the path towards me, I can sense a really powerful story coming with them. When they reach me, we talk a bit about the club and what we do, but I can tell that Martin's mum's got something else that she wants to talk to me about. And suddenly out it comes, and she says, and Martin is autistic, and he has ADHD. And we've tried to get him into other groups and clubs, and they've always said no. And she shares with me the stories of the club who wouldn't include Martin because they didn't have enough volunteers. I've yet to meet the children's or youth group that have enough volunteers for the work they're doing. Another group said that whilst they had volunteers, they weren't trained in how to support children and young people like Martin, and so they wouldn't include him either. A third group said that they couldn't include Martin because they were worried he would be a health and safety risk to the other children and young people and leaders. Heartbreaking, isn't it? And my heart was breaking, and almost all my attention was wrapped up in what Martin and his mum were sharing with me. The rest of it was being distracted by the absolute chaos going on in the room behind me. There were screams and young people climbing the walls, and at one point a really piercing shriek which made me turn around to find out what had happened. And in that moment, three things took place. Firstly, I noticed several other young people with a variety of additional needs that we've been journeying with. I sensed God whispering in my ear and saying, there's room for another one, you know. There's room for another one. And I heard Martin's mum ask the key question. Would Martin be able to come here? And I heard the tremble in her voice, and I knew what that meant. She was waiting for another no, another excuse, another reason why Martin wouldn't be able to join in. And it broke my heart, and I found myself turning back to her and saying, we would love for Martin to be a part of our group. And at that moment, another scream behind me gave me the opportunity to turn and gesture and add, and as you can see, he'll fit right in. And she laughed, and the light came back into her eyes, and the weight lifted from her shoulders. This stuff matters. It's important that we find ways to say yes to the children and young people that God brings to us to be a part of the work we're doing. What does Jesus have to say about all of this? Well, quite a bit, as it turns out. Lots of encounters that Jesus had with people who today we might term as having additional needs, whether that's people with disabilities, health conditions, and so on. Here he met Bartimaeus, a man who's blind and begs for a living on the side of the road from Jericho to Jerusalem. On this particular occasion, as Jesus is passing by on his way to Jerusalem, heading towards what will be known as Palm Sunday, Bartimaeus hears all the commotion and asks what's going on. And somebody tells him that it's Jesus and all his followers and a big crowd of people. And Bartimaeus, having heard about Jesus, calls out to him and says, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." And of course, what happens next to Bartimaeus is what can happen all too often in even our churches today. He was shushed. He was told to be quiet, told not to be a bother, to keep out of the way. Thankfully, Bartimaeus ignored that advice and he called out to Jesus again. And Jesus heard him and invited Bartimaeus to come to him. And so there's Bartimaeus, a man who's blind, in front of Jesus, who for 3 years has gone round teaching and preaching and healing people. The crowd would have gathered round. They'd have heard the stories of the miracles Jesus had done. Some of them would have seen previous times when Jesus had healed somebody. There'd be expectancy in the air. But then Jesus did the unexpected. He did something that nobody was anticipating, but it's a really important teaching moment for us as we consider this today. Jesus asked Bartimaeus a question. He said, "What would you have me do for you? What do you want me to do for you?" Everybody would have been astonished. Well, it's Bartimaeus. He's blind. What do you think he wants from you? But Jesus didn't assume. He didn't decide on Bartimaeus' behalf what Bartimaeus wanted. He gave Bartimaeus the dignity and respect and agency to be able to say for himself what it was that he wanted. And Bartimaeus said, "I want to see." So Jesus gave him his sight. And that's a really important teaching moment for us today. As we're engaging with children and young people with additional needs and their families, let's ask them, what would you have us do for you? What do you want us to do differently so that church works for you? What are the barriers that you experience? What are the challenges that you bump into whenever you come to church? Let's work together to identify those and break them down. Let's do inclusion with people, including them in that conversation and hearing from them, rather than trying to do inclusion unto them, which means that we're putting things in place that may not be what people are actually needing. So have a look at exploring that with the folk that you journey with, and being vulnerable and willing to listen to what they say, and to together to put some changes in place that can help them. So in a moment, I'm going to get you again to pause this video and have a little think about some of the things that we've looked at so far, about how this needs to be a ministry focus for the perhaps 5% of children and young people with additional needs that we see in our churches, but also a mission focus for us for the 95% that are all around in our community. We need to meet those young people and families where they are. That might involve us getting into schools work and particularly engaging with specialist schools. Don't forget the siblings, that often overlooked group that have support needs of their own. Understand the challenges that families face, especially in an environment where secular support is being stripped away. It's hard for them and it's breaking families apart. Let's make church a safe place for everyone, a meerkat-free zone. And let's say yes, like I had the privilege to say to Martin and his mum. Remember what Jesus did and said when he asked Bartimaeus, "What would you have me do for you? What do you want me to do for you?" And then let's build those strategies and solutions together with children and young people with additional needs and their families. So pause this video, have a little think about those takeaways from this first section. And then after you've had a little think about it, there's time for a quick stretch break so that you can perhaps just get a tea or a coffee or some water, have a little walk around, and then be ready for our second session. Welcome back. I hope you had a good break and are ready for our second session, where we're going to be exploring some tools, techniques, ideas and strategies that you can use in your setting to better support children and young people with a range of additional needs and disabilities. Alongside asking the families and the children and young people themselves, what can we do for you? What would you have us do for you? One of the most important things that we can do is to have somebody that owns this within our setting. Having somebody as inclusion champion or inclusion leader means that this stays on the radar. There's a focus that continues in this area. Maybe at leadership team meetings, it comes up as a regular agenda item. And so it continues to help the church to think about and think through what inclusion of children and young people with additional needs and their families is going to be like across all the events, activities, services and clubs that happen in the week-to-week, month-to-month, year-to-year life of the church. Let me share with you Timmy's story to help illustrate how powerful it is and important it is to have an inclusion champion in our church settings. Timmy is about 10 and he goes to a city church with his family on their Sunday morning 10 o'clock service. Now, this church likes to serve all kinds of food and refreshments to folk before the service starts. And so at about 9:45 in the morning, their entrance lobby area is absolutely packed with people, all getting something to eat and drink, all chatting and getting ready for the church service. And that would be when Timmy and his family would arrive at church. Timmy would walk into a wall of people and noise and smells of food and bright lights. Timmy's autistic and he has learning difficulties. He also has a sensory sensitivity to loud noise and to bright lights and also to touch. And so as Timmy experienced this crowd and all the sensory overload that brought with it, he was already starting to become overwhelmed. When it was time for the church service to start, everybody would be rushing through to the worship area, and Timmy and his family would be swept along with the tide. That meant that everybody got a little bit sort of bumped and jostled as they went, which for most people wasn't really a problem. But for Timmy, who had that sensory sensitivity to touch, it meant those bumps and jostles could be quite painful. That added to the sensory overload and being overwhelmed that he was experiencing. When he got with his family into the worship area, of course, the worship band were in full flow, wound up to 11 on the volume dial. It was really loud. And again, that just added to Timmy's struggles. The family were then trying to find somewhere to sit, and maybe they'd sit one side one week, the other side another week, sometimes stood at the back because there wasn't anywhere left. Now, Timmy craves routine and consistency and for things to be the same. And of course, that was never the reality for him at church. And so that just made things even worse for Timmy. By now, he's got no idea what's happening now, what's happening next, when he's going to be going out to the children's work session, and what they're going to be doing when he gets there. And the anxiety and stress about all of that could often be the final straw that would spiral Timmy into becoming completely brain overwhelmed and having what we might commonly know as a meltdown. Now, thankfully, they appointed an inclusion champion at Timmy's church. And the inclusion champion got alongside Timmy and his family, remembering to do inclusion with them and not unto them. and ask them to work with her to think about a way to arrive at church that would work better for them as a family, but also that the church could help and support through. And what they together came up with was that the family would arrive just after 10 o'clock. The entrance lobby area would be much clearer. There'd still be the opportunity for them to get some food and refreshments, and there'd be folk there to welcome them. But that welcome team would be trained to know not to come rushing up to Timmy or try and give him a hug or be loud with him, but to quietly and gently approach him. Maybe offer a hand for a high five, because sometimes Timmy would do that. But then make sure that they were welcomed and got what they needed and could then head into the worship area. On the way, Timmy would pick up some ear defenders, which would help him to protect him from the loud noise when he got into the worship area itself. The family would then head to some reserved seating that was put aside for them. Timmy had helped to pick out his favourite place to sit. And on those seats were little signs that said, "These seats are waiting for Timmy and his family." Also on the seats would be some resources for Timmy. There'd be a little visual timetable, I'll talk about those presently, that would share with Timmy using images and symbols what's happening now, what's happening next, and when he'll be going out to the children's group. There'd also be some resources left by the children's worker that would be something for Timmy to do that he enjoyed. He likes doing colouring and word searches, so it might be something like that. But those things would be themed around whatever the story or topic was going to be that they would talk about in the children's group when he got there. So he had some time to prepare and to be ready for the session that he was heading to. All of those things together transformed church for Timmy and made sure that church was a safe place for him, a place where he thrives and a place where he doesn't have brain overloads and meltdowns anymore. Having an inclusion champion has really made a powerful difference for Timmy and his family. Maybe it could at your venue too. Another thing we can do when engaging with families is to find out what's working in other areas of that child or young person's life. We only see that child or young person perhaps on a Sunday morning or a club night for a relatively short period of time. But for a lot of the week, they'll be at school, they'll be at home, and there are often really useful support strategies already in place in those other settings. If we can find out what those are, then we can adapt them and bring them into our church context as well. That does two things, both of which are really useful. Firstly, it gives continuity to the child or young person. What we're doing and how we're supporting them is recognisable to them. But it also gives us a head start in putting a support strategy together to help and support that child in our setting as well. We're not reinventing the wheel. We're learning from the experience of others and applying that into our setting. A great way to be able to access that information is by using a tool that's often used in school settings called a one-page profile, sometimes called an All About Me sheet. Now you can download lots of copies and styles of these one-page profiles from the Chef Kids website that's on your screen. If you go to chefkids.co.uk/resources, you'll go straight to where the one-page profiles are. And there are different styles for young children all the way up to older teenagers. They all ask these three things. Firstly, what do people like and admire about you? That's a narrative changer. That helps us to think differently about a child or young person. It helps us to think about the positive things that it's important to know about that child or young person. I know families who have been reduced to tears when they've been asked to fill in a one-page profile because nobody's ever asked those what people like and admire about you questions of them before. What makes me happy gives us an opportunity to learn about what they enjoy doing, what makes them happy, what delights them. We can use that and help them to connect with what we're doing through that. I'll explore some options for that in just a moment with you. And then how I want to be supported. Well, yeah, that's a great thing for us to know as well. If we get some tips there, then we can add that to what we already know about that child or young person to start to build a support strategy for them. Now, that what makes me happy question can lead us to understanding what they enjoy doing, and we can use that to help them to learn. Here's 3 examples. One's a bit of a gratuitous opportunity for me to include my son James in all of this. James loves jigsaws. There he is as a young boy doing jigsaws. He's 23 now, but he still likes jigsaws and learns through them. Here we were learning about friendship, and James is doing a jigsaw about Mickey Mouse and friends, which helped him to have something tactile and sensory that he could do, something that he was good at doing, but also something that built into a picture of friends together. There's Mickey, Minnie, Donald Duck and Pluto, all friends together. Now, we could have sat James with his peers and talked about Jonathan and David, or Ruth and Naomi, friends in the Bible, but James wouldn't have stayed connected with that for very long. So giving him a jigsaw to do and working through that with him helped him to learn a bit more about friendship. Now, it might not be jigsaws for the children and young people you're journeying with, but I would hazard a guess that Lego will feature in there somewhere. Of course, there's Lego Church and all the tools and resources that come with that. There's the Brick Bible, resources that recreate Bible stories in sort of a cartoon form, in Bibles that, again, for a child or young person that loves Lego, can really reveal those stories to them. A box of Lego can turn into, as it has here, the Temple of Jerusalem for a group that were learning about that in their session. Or in the small picture below that, Abraham and Isaac up the mountain when Isaac was going to be sacrificed. You might just spot the ram caught in the thicket in the background. There are Brick Bible videos too. So there's a wealth of resource around Lego that you can use to help a child or young person that enjoys the world of Lego, who loves that activity, to be able to engage with the Bible stories and themes that we're exploring. Lego is very popular with a wide range of children and young people with additional needs, particularly neurodivergent children and young people. Lego goes together in the same way each time. There's a familiarity about it, which is pleasing. Similarly with Minecraft. Minecraft, again, is all about building and creating, and it's a space that a lot of children and young people with additional needs enjoy. There are all sorts of Minecraft servers out there that are safe places for children and young people with additional needs. There's the unofficial Bible for Minecrafters, again, recreating those Bible stories through the medium of Minecraft. And there's a YouTube channel called Pixel Heart Bible, Pixel, Pixel Heart Bible, that again has Bible stories recreated within Minecraft itself. All of this really helps a child or a young person that loves Minecraft to engage with the Bible better and to stay connected with the themes and stories that we're unpacking with them. Explore what they enjoy doing and understand that and use that to help them to learn. Other tools that are used in the education world include tools like social stories. My friend Lynn McCann at reachoutasc.com, she works up in the northwest of England across schools and also churches there. She's great at creating these social stories. This one is all about going to the children's club at church called Joy Club. And there's a bit to fill in, but then there's also information about church itself, what happens at church, who goes to church, and then a bit about Joy Club, a bit about the things that happen at Joy Club, some of the activities that children and young people take part in. What happens if they feel a bit overwhelmed and need a little bit of calm space or some ear defenders? And then what happens after Joy Club's finished, when they're collected by their families and maybe go to the church cafe? Using a few symbols and images, it helps perhaps complex and difficult to understand topic or theme to become much more accessible for children and young people with a wide range of additional needs. And so think about how you could use social stories like this in your context, perhaps starting with one to introduce your children's club, but maybe thinking about other activities that you run and creating a social story for that as well. Sensory stories are powerful too. The more senses that we can engage as we share with children and young people, the better it is. That's true of children's and youth work generally, particularly true for children and young people with additional needs, and especially for a child or young person that may have limited or no use of one of their senses. For example, a child who's visually impaired or a child who's deaf. Here we've got a sensory story all about the weather. About using a torch for the sun, a plant sprayer for the rain, an ice pack for the ice and snow, a fan for the wind, a thunderstick or tambourine for the thunder and lightning. Think about how to make the stories you tell, the themes you're unpacking, as multisensory as possible. Think about not just showing them something and telling them about something, but giving them something they can touch or taste or smell. Use as many of the senses as you can. There's a really great book, if you can get hold of a copy of it, called Multisensory Ideas for Worship. Multisensory Ideas for Worship. It's written by Irene Smale. Irene was the diocesan children's worker for Chichester Diocese. She's also married to Ishmael, the well-known children's worship leader. Her book currently isn't in print, but you can get copies of it online quite readily. So have a look for Multisensory Ideas for Worship by Irene Smale, 101 Ways to Make Our Worship Multisensory. If you've got children and young people who are staying in a church service for a talk or a sermon, for example, perhaps in an all-age service, then you might find something like these church or sermon notes helpful. You could recreate something that takes on this idea and use it in your own context. I like the one in the middle, which has a word list, so children and young people will listen out for the words that are on the list and will tick the box when they've heard it, or multiple ticks if they hear it lots of times. I like that cloud that says to remember. Gives them a space that they can doodle or scribble or write something to help them to remember what the talk was about. These are really helpful tools in giving them a sensory and tactile tool to use during the talk, something for them to do, but also a way of them taking away with them some information about the service and the talk that they were a part of. Fidgets and fiddles. We talked about those very briefly at the beginning. Maybe you're still using the fidget or fiddle that you were accessing at that point. There are two kinds of fiddle or fidget toy: sensory calming fidgets and sensory stimulating fidgets. And it's quite important to understand the difference between the two and how to use them. So a sensory calming fidget would be something like a soft toy, perhaps a pot of Play-Doh that you can gently squeeze, or a glitter wand, a plastic tube with glitter in that is really quite mesmerizing to look at, quite calming to use. Now, fidget or fiddle toys like that are helpful to give to a child or young person who is becoming overwhelmed and needs to regulate their senses and regain a sense of calm. Using a calming fidget can help them to do that. But there are also sensory stimulating fidgets. Those would include fidgets like a fidget cube or a finger spinner or a ball that lights up. Things that have some sort of response or reaction to them. One of those rubber pop sheets can be a sensory stimulating fidget. Those are useful for a child or young person that needs to wake their senses up. Somebody who's struggling to focus and concentrate, for example. Now, clearly getting that the right way round is important. And so I would encourage you to issue fidgets out to the children and young people that need them, rather than making it a free-for-all that they can just dive into the box and grab what they want. That way you can do a little bit of kind of fidget triage before you hand them a fidget, to assess whether they need something to help them to regain a sense of calm, or whether they need something to wake their senses up. And then you can give them something that will help them with that. The other tip really with fidgets and fidget boxes is choose your moment wisely to introduce a fidget or fiddles box for the first time. Don't introduce a resource like this on the most important teaching moment of the year, like Easter Sunday, for example. because it will be a distraction the first couple of times you bring it out. Everybody wants to know what it is, what's in there, and have a look at everything. So it will be a bit of a distraction to start with. But after a couple of weeks, the novelty value starts to wear off, becomes just a familiar thing that they know is there. And you'll start to really then see the benefit of it. So pick a more neutral time to introduce a fidget or fiddle box for the first time. Visual timetables can be really useful as well. A way of sharing with a child or young person what's happening through the program, or in a simple form, just what's happening now and next. You'll see that I've put on the screen one of James's visual timetables from when he was in the junior youth group. There was a bit of Velcro down the middle, and his picture would move down through each stage of the program as we went through step by step. James would himself move his picture down through the various stages, and that helped him mentally to move on from one activity to the next. Now, sometimes we'd get to church and James would take his picture and move it straight down to snack time. James likes snack time. So we'd have to let him know that snack time is later, but it's circle time first. And he'd mournfully accept that, because he would know that snack time was still to come. And he wasn't going to miss out on snack time, but there were other things to do first. But it would help him to know what that sequence of events would be. And Now Next board offers something similar, but in a much simpler form. There's just a symbol that you attach to a bit of Velcro in the Now box, and again, a similar add a symbol on the Velcro to the Next box. In this case, it's story time now, and then garden next. Now, once we've finished with story, we take story time off, we move garden across to now, and we introduce something else to next, whatever the activity is going to be after that. And bit by bit, children and young people are guided through the session step by step. There's a web link on the screen on the Now Next board, theautismpage.com/now-next. And there's loads more information there about Now Next boards and how to use them. It's a great site to look at more generally for information that's supportive of autistic children and young people. One-to-ones and buddies, helpful to have somebody that can get alongside a child or young person with additional needs to support them and help them when they're struggling, to help them know what to do, to help keep them focused and engaged. Now, earlier we were talking about how few groups have enough volunteers already, and here I am saying go and get some more. But there is a stealth way to recruit one-to-one volunteers. Some of the folk on your screen at the moment have been one-to-one volunteers for my son James, and the stealth method has worked well, not just in our context, but in lots of other churches that I've visited that have started to use a similar method. So it starts out with when you're running something like a church party, perhaps at Easter or in the summer, and use that opportunity as a way to engage with somebody that you know would be really good as a one-to-one support volunteer for a child or young person, and invite them along to the party and ask if they would be willing to just spend a bit of time with that child or young person to support them during the party. Now, quite a few people will say okay to that. It's only a one-off commitment for a short period of time. So they might well say, yes, they'd be willing to come and help that child or young person during that 2 or 3 hours of the party. Once they've done that, maybe the next thing that you have got lined up is a holiday club, perhaps again during the May half term or later in the summer holiday. And you can go back to the person then who helped out at the party and ask if they'd be willing to help again. Slightly longer this time, maybe 2 or 3 mornings or whatever a holiday club looks like for you. But you could invite them to come along and, again, support that same child that they looked after at the party. Quite a few people, again, would be willing to go along with that and help out with that. Maybe they enjoyed being at the party with that child or young person, and it'd be great to work with them again. Once they've done that, they're then a lot nearer to agreeing to being part of a little team that can support that child or young person, perhaps on a Sunday morning or the occasional club night. Not every week, perhaps once or twice a month, but because they've done the party and the holiday club, it takes them to a place where they're much more likely to say yes to being part of that broader team as well. Buddies can be other young people that can get alongside their peers and support them and help them, and be an early warning system for leaders, looking out for that child or young person struggling and quickly reporting that into a responsible adult, so that that adult can then intervene and help that young person who's struggling to be able to regroup, get the help they need, and continue to be a part of that particular activity. Of course, always remember to build these strategies with the children and young people themselves and their families, but also remember to make sure that all the team know what the plan is. If we're on a rota, then we might be with that child or young person this week, but we won't necessarily be with them next week. And we need whoever's on next week's team to know what successes have been put in place this week, what's worked, so they can build on that success when they're engaging with that child or young person next week. So make sure there's a mechanism to communicate success stories through the team, and particularly when you're on a rota. Journey with others. There are lots of ways to do that, but one way is through the Additional Needs Alliance, a collective of getting on for 4,000 children's, youth and families workers, church leaders, practitioners, parents, carers, guardians, folk who are passionate about supporting children and young people with additional needs. So have a look at the website, have a look at the Facebook group, and join the Facebook group and be a part of the conversation. There's opportunities to share resources, to learn from each other. People ask questions, people offer their thoughts and ideas. It's a really great and vibrant community to be a part of. And of course, remember to pray. So important that we lift ourselves and the children and young people that we're journeying with into God's presence, so that he can bless us and give us the right things to say, the right things to do, the right way to be, so that we can be Jesus for the children and young people that we're meeting with each time. So again, another chance to have a little think about the things that we've looked at in that section, about being an inclusion champion, learning from the education world and special educational needs coordinators. What does that look like in your context? Building that relationship with families. What works well at home? What works well at school? How can we bring that into our church context? The resources schools use. We've looked at one-page profiles, at social stories, at sensory stories. How can you use those in your setting? Use what they enjoy doing to help them learn. We looked at jigsaws, Lego, Minecraft, but you'll get 101 other ideas from the one-page profiles that your children and young people will fill in. Understand and use different methods of communication. I talked about the visual timetable, but also the Now Next board. And then one-to-one and buddy support, that stealth way of recruiting one-to-ones, but also utilising other young people as buddies. Remembering to engage with families and do inclusion with and not unto, but making sure the rest of the team know what the plan is. And then going on that journey with others to learn together how to do this well. And then remembering to pray. So have a think about those different ideas. What does that look like in your context? And then when you've done that, it's time to have another little stretch break, another chance to get something to drink before we go into our final session, where you'll be putting some of this into practice. See you then. Welcome back. I hope you've had a good break. In this final session of our module, I'm going to show you another video clip. Then we're going to explore a case study, and there are 3 for you to choose from. And then I'm going to signpost you towards a couple of extra resources that might be useful for you to look at beyond today. And there'll be an opportunity for you to feedback any questions that you've got. Pause the video for a few moments and head to the video playlist that you looked at earlier in the first session. There you'll find video 2, which is about Philippa. who was born blind and who shares her story really powerfully about the ways that she has been supported in her church, but also how she notices the difference when she goes to other churches that don't know her and don't know how to support her. It's a really powerful video. And listen out particularly for the reference to sensory storytelling that she gives during her video. Have a look at that now and then come back to this video to continue on into the final parts of this session. We're now going to have a look at the case studies that are available to you in your workbook. You'll find them on page 30 and 31 of your workbook, and there are 5 to choose from, each covering different ages and different additional needs and differences. So there's Joshua, who's 9 and autistic. There's Jessica, who's 12, who has dyslexia. Joe, who's 13 and has ADHD. Jasmine, who's 7 and is deaf, and then Jack, who's 15 and has a mobility disability. Have a look at the case studies. Maybe pick one that closest matches to one of the children and young people that you're journeying with, and work through the case study. Have a think about what we could change about the session that we're running, but also how we can put some tools in place to support that child or young person better. Come up with as big a list of ideas as you can, and think of all the different aspects of support that might be necessary for that child or young person. When you've done that, start to work through that list and think about maybe 2 or 3 of those ideas that you could start with. What are the quick wins that maybe you could even put in place this week? Of course, in reality, if we were doing this with the children and young people that you're already journeying with, we'd do this with them and with their families. And we build that list up of ideas that we could implement with their support and input. But together with them, we could then identify the 2 or 3 things we'd start with. It's always good to introduce these changes gradually. If we were to put that whole list of ideas in place in one go, it would be overwhelming for that child or young person that we're looking to support. So put 2 or 3 ideas in place to start with. Let those settle in for a couple of weeks. Then maybe introduce 1 or 2 more. That does 2 things for us. Firstly, it gives that child or young person the opportunity to adapt to those changes more readily. They can accept them more easily because there are fewer of them to cope with. But also for us, it helps us to measure the success or otherwise of those things that we're putting in place. If we put 12 things in place all in one go, we're not going to be able to tell what's working and what's not. But if we put a couple of ideas in, 2 or 3 ideas in, we've got a much better chance of measuring what's successful and what's not. So pause the video again. Have a look at the case studies in your workbooks. You can have a look at as many of them as you would like to, and come up with as many strategies and ideas and tools and changes to program as you can think of that would make a difference for that child or young person. And in doing that, think about what that means for the children and young people that you are actually journeying with already. Welcome back from the case studies. I hope you enjoyed working through at least one, maybe several of those case studies and thinking about ways to support the children and young people that they contained. Just as we come in towards the end of this module, I just want to share with you a few things that you can find that will be helpful for you. If you go to the Energize website run by Urban Saints, you'll find all sorts of resources there that include notes and additional content for supporting children and young people with additional needs. If you search in the search box for additional needs, it will highlight all of that content that you can then have a look at and use in your weekly meeting plan. So do explore Energize to find out more about the additional needs support tools that we've got available for you there. If you use a parachute in your children's work, I would really encourage you to get hold of a copy of this book, Parachute Bible Stories by our friends at Through the Roof. Through the Roof, as the name suggests, are a Christian disability organisation, and they're brilliant at providing support for disabled people across the country. But they've produced this book called Parachute Bible Stories, recreating Bible stories, 20 Bible stories, by using a parachute. And whether it's Jesus and the disciples out on the boat in the middle of the storm, or whether it's Jesus going up the mountain to pray, there's lots and lots of great stories that you can have a look at there and retell and recreate inclusively and accessibly by using a copy of Parachute Bible Stories. Lots of people have found it really helpful, so I recommend it to you. I've already talked about the Additional Needs Alliance, and hopefully you'll join the Facebook group and have a look at the website. But on the website, there's also a map and directory of accessible churches. There's about 100 of them there now. We'd love to add more. So do fill in the box that's there to add your church if you'd like it to be featured. Gives us places that we can signpost families towards that are looking for a church that could be inclusive and accessible for their child. But have a good explore of the rest of the resources that are available there too. That brings us to the end of our session, our module 1 of the Additional Needs Practitioner self-paced program. But if you've got questions about the program, about this module in particular, then do be in touch with me. I'd love to hear from you, and I'd love to help if you've got some questions that you'd like to explore with me. My email address is on your screen, so do make a note of that and get back to me with any thoughts, reflections, questions that you might have. I hope you found this module helpful. There are another 7 modules in the whole program, and so I look forward to sharing those with you as well. But for now, thank you for being here for this module, and I hope that what we've covered in this hour or so is going to be helpful for you in your own context. Bye for now.